We have Steve Charles. In war, men protect what women replenish their civilization. Neglect either duty and civilization declines. If women don't keep up replacement rates, why should men fight and die for a declining civilization? That's from our Australian friend, Steve Charles. Thank you so much for the soup chat, man. Appreciate it. And I'm curious how far you take that, though. Because I think people agree with that, but men have the state can dictate to men, okay, we don't care about your bodily autonomy. We're going to ship you off, and you're going to go to war, and we're going to put you in the front lines. And if you try to run away, you go AWOL, we're going to capture you, and then you're going to be tried for treason or what is it? What's the specific military term for
retreat? I knew
It's not retreat. Oh. No. What is it? What's the military term for? It's not AWOL. It's I don't know. Whatever. You're gonna be court-martialed. You're gonna maybe. I think in wartime. I think if you flee the battle or whatever, they're just gonna kill you. Your own side's gonna just kill you.
Discharge?
Discharge.
It's not discharge.
My neighbor did that when I was young. He ran from his platoon, and I don't know, he got dishonorably discharged, and then he went to prison.
Yeah. But so the government can draft men to war. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about drafting women to have children? What do you think about that? Is that fair proposition?
No, because we want children to be born into families that are
healthy,
willing to be responsible for a child, that are willing to be good parents.
Yeah, but men don't want to go and die in some trench in the French cow country.
Okay, but there's also a child you have to consider in this situation. It's not just about what people want. There's a child. There's a child involved, and we want the well-being of that child to be taken into consideration.
I also don't recall God ever comparing childbearing to war, men being enlisted in war in the Bible.
Sorry, what?
I don't recall women bearing a child compared to men enlisting in the war in the Bible.
Are you saying war less bad than giving birth, or I'm just?
Well, actually, it is. So the idea of women being saved through childbirth is mentioned many, many, many times. That's one of the primary pathways to salvation for women. It gives it a moral autonomy in society.
Also, I'm not really interested on this particular topic. I'm not making a religious argument because the United States and every single country in the world compels males only to be conscripted in times of war. So it's not even a biblical or theological or religious argument.
I agree with you. I was just responding.
Oh, well, I'm not directing that at you, Andrew. I'm directing it at her.
That's 1 Timothy 2:15, by the way. Yet she will be saved through childbearing. They continue in faith, love, and holiness.
Yeah.
So
for example,
it is a moral duty.
You could have a secular government that only, and this is the case for almost every single nation with the exception of less than a handful, men are compelled by force in times of war, drafted. There's no corresponding, we're going to force women to do this.
Okay,
sure.
Low-key, this sounds like The Handmaid's Tale. Are you saying we're forcefully impregnating women? Is that how else are we?
No, I'm not doing a prescriptive claim. I'm speaking descriptively. I'm talking about what is, not what should be. I don't think women should be forced to, but it is an interesting thought experiment to be like, okay, well, if the government can force men to, go somewhere, European theater during World War II, European theater during World War I, and die in some trench and be bombarded with shells and for months on end and suffer extreme PTSD. This kind of ties into our previous conversation with duties. So men have duties to the point where they can be forced to go to war for their country. And we can talk about, well, women's duties are this, but it's not state compelled, whereas men's duties are state compelled through force. Nobody points a gun in a woman's head and says, in a time of war where I can frame it this way. Well, to finish my sentence, women, there's nothing that compels women from the state down that says, okay, you need to go have kids, you need to produce kids. Nothing like that. let's say, for example,
Not even that it would be a good idea. You know, like, think about it from even the military side. Like, you guys remember growing up with the Army commercials? Like, they would even put the Army commercials in kids' shows, right? Thinking that this would assist with the psychological indoctrination for later, you know what I mean? And they had the cool music, and, you know, they would have these cool slogans like Army of One, you know what I mean? You know, things like that. All of that was indoctrination from the top down in order to get men to fulfill a social duty for the protection of the nation. Same thing, you know, but there's no equivalent of that, even through propaganda for women. And that's kind of Brian's main point here.
So then are you both saying that men should not be legally obligated to fight in wars?
Well, I think that the draft is necessary. And I think that there's all sorts of compelling reasons I can give. Now, this is one of my most unpopular positions, that I think that the draft is necessary, and that there can be great times where you need huge amounts of conscripts to defend the nation, and that there is a social obligation for men to do that. The reason men resist that now is because they don't feel like women are living up to the same obligations that they are compelled to have to move towards, and so they don't want the draft anymore. Women can't be drafted. Right? There's all sorts of double standards for women. Women, for instance, sports reporters, I was talking about this earlier today, they can go into men's locker rooms. And they fought for the right to go into men's locker rooms to interview them. Men can't go into women's locker rooms and do interviews. Like, there's all kinds of crazy double standards which are set between the sexes. In an egalitarian society, you can't really have that. So it's like, if it is the case that you think that women deserve an honored place in society as matrons, then they have to fulfill their social obligations like they expect men to do. Or why is it that you would have any expectations of men? Why wouldn't men just resist it at every level? That's Brian's point here, right?
I actually agree with you a lot on the draft is necessary and stuff. What I think, this is just a thought I've randomly had, is that women shouldn't be allowed to go to college until they're like 28. If men are being drafted, women shouldn't be allowed to go to college until they're 28 unless they have kids. It's just a thought I had. Because if they don't have a career to seek after, then they have husbands. It's a thought. It's a thought.
Interesting thought.
It's a thought.
That's a crazy
Fair.
thought.
Hey,
It's a crazy thought.
interesting
I speak what I say. I speak what I say.
yeah, that's okay.
I think one way that
idea.
you can take care of this is you take the right to vote and you give it to married households instead, one household voting.
Ooh, that's
I think
nice.
that's a
There we
really
go.
good idea.
I like that
One of
idea.
the reasons that's a good idea is right now in the current state of voting, the anti-suffragettes, the ones who were against feminism initially, and it was first wave feminism that brought in the suffrage movement to say that women should be able to vote, they made it one of the most compelling arguments, which is this will divide household against household. It'll divide husbands against wives. The second women become political pawns of the machine, they will be divided from their husbands. That's exactly what's happened. The anti-suffragette arguments read like prophecies now. If you read them now, they read like prophecies. Like, it's amazing how accurate each one of those arguments is.
Oh, one question,
Households
Andrew.
are indeed divided.
And the anti-suffragettes, wasn't it predominantly women, correct?
That's correct. Well, not only that, but what's really interesting is that they had to fight so that women couldn't vote on voting, because when women voted on their right to vote, they voted against it. And initially, feminists made the bold claim that the reason is because women were too comfortable and their status in society was too good. And it was. They couldn't incur any debt. No debt. They weren't allowed to incur any debt whatsoever. The husband had to incur the debt.
Wow.
They weren't, all of these things, that women were so comfortable in society, they didn't want to be considered political cogs. To give you an idea of how powerful women were in their moral stances before they became cogs of the voting machine, they passed the 18th Amendment, which passed before the 19th Amendment, which is their right to vote, right? They got the 18th Amendment passed on just moral grounds because they were considered moral arbiters in society. They were considered the more moral sex, because they were not political cogs to be used. And it's like, and they gave up all that high ground. It's just crazy to me. It's like backwards. You know what I mean? It's backwards. We should not be dividing husbands against wives. We don't need to do that. It's not necessary.
I would say in like
Hang on,
today's...
chair three was giving me the look though. She was giving me the like.
Sorry, I have
crazy-
RBF.
This crazy fucking guy, this crazy fucker's ideas over here.
Do you actually think that women should not have the right to vote?
Well, actually, I think most people shouldn't have the right to vote, not just women specifically. And here, well, let me make a case. And let's see, maybe I can make a compelling enough argument that I can change your mind. Does that sound fair?
You can try.
So, do you think that you're pretty informed on the issue of abortion?
Yes.
Do you think that most women at 18 years old are?
No, but I don't think most men are either.
Why do you think it's a good idea? Yeah, men either. Exactly. Agreed. Do you think it's a good idea that they can nullify your well-informed vote?
That they can what?
Nullify your well-informed vote on that issue.
I think that everyone should still have the right to use their vote when they are impacted by the government.
Why do you hate the founders so much? The founders didn't believe that. Our founding fathers not only didn't believe that, but set it up so that that system was not in place. They believed that stakeholders in society themselves should have the right to vote because they were informed on these political issues and had stake in society. And that the youth especially, like our founding fathers, would roll over in their graves if they knew that 18-year-olds could vote inside of political elections. They would lose their fucking minds. They'd be like, what are you people doing? Are you insane? Why do you disagree with them? Why do you think it's a good idea?
Well, because they're still impacted by the government. That creates the ability for the government to oppress 18-year-olds.
I mean, 10-year-olds.
16-year-olds are.
10-year-olds are.
Yeah, I mean,
16-year-olds are impacted by the government. Should
valid.
they be able to vote?
Well, first of all, 10-year-olds can't also don't
I said
go and
16.
fight wars. But no, I honestly, I mean, it's a valid argument. But no, I think
18. Yeah, it's a valid argument. 18-year-olds can be drafted and they can't buy a beer. They can't buy a fucking beer.
They can't rent a car.
But they can be drafted. They can't buy a cigarette. They can't rent a car, but they can be drafted and go off to war. How is this a good system? Like, make a compelling argument back. How is it a good system?
I think honestly,
18-year-olds are so fucking stupid they shouldn't be able to drink, but they're so smart that they should be allowed to have a gun and that they can be compelled and conscripted into military service. How is this a good system again?
No, I honestly, I kind of see your point, but I don't think the solution is to take away vote. Honestly, if anything, it would be to ensure voters are well informed before they vote. But no, I think it's a hard thing because there's pros and cons of.
I don't think it's a good system. I think if we look, and here maybe I could change your mind because we found some common ground here.
Yes, but your argument doesn't say why women shouldn't have the right to vote. It's kind of just saying why 18-year-olds are dumb.
Was my argument that women shouldn't be able to vote? What was my actual argument? That most people should be able to, right?
Right. Okay. So how does this relate?
Yeah, so I think that you could do one household voting. I would give the right to vote to married households. I think that could be a really good idea. Another way that you could do is you could raise the age of voting to 30. I think that would be super helpful. I think that there's all sorts of different things that you could do, but it's going to disenfranchise a whole lot of people. And I'm just totally fine with that. I don't think everybody needs to be enfranchised. I think what's happened is the way politics are set up in the United States, they're set up between blocks. And it's which block can be bribed by the electoral money that lobbyists go in and say, look, we're going to fund you with X dollars so that we can pump and dump a bunch of cash, right? A big scam for a voting block. And then they use that sort of political power, not on behalf of the constituency, but on behalf of the lobbyists. So why is it a good idea to have everybody politically enfranchised when clearly they make terrible decisions in life? And they're not ready for that sort of responsibility whatsoever in running a nation, having the say in running a nation. Why would you let them vote? That's stupid, right?
Well, the issue is there's smart people that are 18 and there's really, really dumb people that are 80 years old. And like there's going to be smart and dumb people. And so you can't just generalize a whole age group.
I completely agree with you, but you can generalize, and here's why. I can agree with you. There's going to be really smart. There's going to be 18-year-olds right now who are much smarter than you. Not me, but you. And the thing, I'm kidding. It was a great joke. I slipped it in there. It was a great joke. But anyway, there's going to be 18-year-olds who are out there who are smarter than me and you. I agree with that. There's not going to be many, though. And there's going to be 80-year-olds who are much dumber than that 18-year-old, but there's not going to be that many of them. Okay, so if that's the case, we're not going to make social policy based on outliers.
Yeah.
You would never do that. Everything in politics is a give and take. Anytime you make a political decision, it's going to negatively affect some group somewhere, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So knowing that, having that foreknowledge, why would we make social prescriptions based around the fact that some stupid-ass 18-year-olds no longer can vote, but the like one or two who were really smart and informed, we've taken away their vote too? It's like, so what?
Yes,
That's politics.
But if the government isn't incentivized to care about young people, if we really did make the voting age 30, then the government isn't going to care about young people anymore. They are not going to work as hard for them. That's just how it would work. That's why
That's silly.
It's an
That's
issue.
silly. The constituency of the government would be parents. The parents are definitely going to have a whole lot to say about how young people are treated and what young people ought to be doing or not doing, just like parents in the home do right now with their kids who can't vote. So how would it even disenfranchise them? They would have to trust in the generation of their own parents to represent them correctly, which, by the way, they do right now. They do it right now.
Did you say something?
I wouldn't say that they
No,
look
no,
out
I'd like
for-
an argument there. I'd like an argument back.
Yeah.
From me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I agree. There's pros and cons to each thing, but no, I still think that the government is not going to care as much about the younger people if they're not having to cater to their vote. And I think that if you are being taxed by the country, if you are having to fight for your country, you should have a say in how the government is run. But no, I do think there's just an issue. I agree with you that there's an issue on voters not being well informed.
This is really, I guess, the thing I would like to take to task here is this idea that the government's going to stop caring about young people if young people can't vote in the government. It's like, does the government stop caring about 16-year-olds because they can't vote? No. Do they stop caring about toddlers because toddlers can't vote? No. In fact, parents are out there making all sorts of political decisions and political votes based around the protection of the young in society and the infirm in society, 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, on behalf of those 2-year-olds, 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, because they're the ones who can't. They're the ones who are enfranchised. Why in the world, suddenly if the voting age, let's say it was 25, do you think that the government's like, well, you're 23, fuck off, I don't care what you think anymore? The enfranchised people still care, right? Like, they're the ones who tell the government what's what.
Well, also the thing is, a 2-year-old isn't having to pay taxes. They're not having to fight a war. So if we were to go by your argument that you can't vote until you're 30, I don't think people under 30 should have to pay taxes or fight in wars.
Why? That's silly. 16-year-olds can work and they get taxed. Should they have to go fight wars?
I think that's an issue that you're giving back to the government, to your country, and you don't have a say in how the country is run.
16-year-olds and 15-year-olds and 14-year-olds with part-time jobs should be able to work to vote then, by that logic?
I think there's pros and cons to everything.
But that doesn't make any sense because your logic is if you're paying into a system, you should have a right to be enfranchised in the system. My counter argument to you is really simple. Then if that's the case, make it logically consistent. At 13 years old, I had a part-time job at a McDonald's. Should I be able to vote? If not, why not?
Honestly, it's a compelling argument in itself. That's why, I mean, no matter which way you go, no matter who you cut out of voting, it's going to negatively impact some people. And it's a complex issue.
So we have to kind of compare our systems and see which one works the best. And it sounds like you're in more agreement with the system which I would propose than I am with the system that you would propose. I'm just asking you to think about it, that's all.
Okay.
All right. I got to get through a bunch of chat. We have Matt here, Chair 3, 100% feminist. Thank you for that super chat. You want to contest the feminist accusation?
I mean, it depends on how you're defining feminists. If you just means equal rights, then sure. But no, I think modern feminism is...
I would define it, I think, the same way he would. It would be the movement towards egalitarianism with the deconstruction of patriarchy. Mm-hmm. The reason deconstruction of patriarchy is necessary for egalitarianism, you can't have equality if you say that men and women cannot be equally franchised in various things. So you're going to have to deconstruct patriarchal systems. Feminism's anti-patriarchal, that's why it's anti-Christian.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are you a feminist?
What? No, I'm not
Are
a
you a
feminist.
feminist by that standard?
No.
So then why do you want egalitarianism?
I think that I think that women deserve rights. But no, I do agree that like men are...
Equal right? Do they deserve equal rights?
What rights are you talking about specifically?
Any
Yeah.
Yeah, so if they deserve any rights, you're going to necessarily be deconstructing patriarchal systems for that to happen. There's no way around that.
Women and men aren't equal.
No, so I'm just saying, like,
Women and men aren't equal. So in order to reach equality, we have to elevate women in one way or another to reach equality.
Like for example, I do think in general that it is good for women to be mothers. Now, I think it should I think women should have the right to go and work, to go and do have a job if they want as well, even though I might think that in general it is better for women to be mothers. So, if that makes sense. I think they should have the legal right.
But nobody's disputing that. What I'm asking is this. It is the case that you're an egalitarian, and it is the case that the only way to have egalitarianism is to dismantle patriarchal systems, because otherwise what are you equalizing? What are you equalizing if it's not equalizing women to men? If that's the case, necessarily you're going to be dismantling patriarchal system. Definitionally then, if you believe in that, you would be a feminist, yeah?
I suppose no. I think there are certain things, like for instance, I don't think women should be drafted. That is one thing. So I don't necessarily.
That's not very equal.
I know. That's I will take that
equal.
back. Maybe not exactly.
But so
equal.
why is it the case though? Why shouldn't women be drafted?
Because I honestly have issues with men in general being drafted. Like I don't.
What do you mean?
I do think that there's an argument that it's taking away like their bodily autonomy.
Well, yeah, but the thing is governments and nations are not going to relinquish their right to force its citizenry into a military conflict if needed. So, given the reality that men do have to register with selective service, should women equally have to register too?
No, I don't think so at the end of the day. And I mean, I guess that's an example of something that I do think is different. I think when I'm talking about equal rights, I'm talking about just generalized.
I mean, we can talk about...
And that creates privilege in society now. Now you're creating privilege for women. So
no, I think men and women are different. I think men and women...
I agree. Men and women are different. You're getting a privileged role. You don't have to go fight no wars and get drafted. What do men get? What do we get in exchange for that?
Well, women are
honor.
considered the crown.
Let her
and the
answer. Let her answer.
Well, I think honor, first of all. I think that's a huge thing, that men are honored for fighting the war.
By who? Other men or women?
But
because in this case, you get an elevated position. Men get to be honored for the position of dying on your behalf. Well, that's fantastic. What a great deal for us.
No, I think that it's different in that aspect. So again, maybe not. Sorry, I said equal. I'm talking equal as in our basic constitutional rights. But no, I do think men and women are different. So I'm not a feminist in that aspect.
So then wouldn't it be a violation of our basic constitutional rights to have a draft? It can't be, right? Because Congress can definitely call up the militia when they need to.
Right.
They do.
Yeah, that's true.
So then
I go back and forth on that. I don't necessarily oppose the draft. I do have concerns about it. I do.
You had something, Abigail? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious if you're against the patriarchal system or if you're for it.
And what aspects? Like what specifics?
I mean,
all aspects.
Yeah, all aspects. Just are you against the patriarchy,
government,
men leading the society?
No.
Okay.
No, definitely not. No, I think men are made by God typically to be leaders. Absolutely.
Okay.
Not that women can't be leaders in some aspects, but typically not the same way.
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I guess something
Unless they're in a
wait.
relationship,
Hold
you
on.
can justify
Hold on.
why you're moving, right? Then they can't be leaders. then it's like their leadership's a little too much.
No, you're good,
if
Lauren.
They don't
You're
want to
good.
justify. Go ahead, Brian.
So it's interesting, though. I think most women don't have any qualms with the current status quo of, okay, men, they're the only ones that get drafted. They're the ones that fight the wars. They're the ones that overwhelmingly die. And there's really doesn't seem to be much of a social movement against forced military conscription of men by women. Most women are just like, yeah, I don't want to go to war. Men should be like, yeah, in some sort of... Here, let me ask you a question. You said that men should not be drafted.
Well, I'm not necessarily... I have concerns about it.
What are your...
I think it is, forcing people to fight for a country can be a little bit against their bodily autonomy, but no, I do think it is sometimes necessary. It's not great. I don't like that we're dragging people that don't want to be there.
Yes, I agree with you. It's bad.
Yeah, it's sometimes necessary,
war bad.
though.
Well, here's the scenario
War bad.
Yeah, war bad. Here's the scenario I would present to you is, so let's say there's an invading country. Let's say, it doesn't even need to be a specific one. It's just a hypothetical. I don't know, Kazakhstan. They're become a military superpower or some shit. And they're going to invade the country, and they are here's their policy. If they successfully invade the country, they're going to kill all the fighting age males in that country who aren't even in the military, and then they're going to take all the women in the country as war brides. Do you think then you should compel men? And here's the scenario. If you don't compel men you force them to join the military, to be part of the military, then you know definitively that you will lose this war against Kazakhstan. And they're going to grape all the women and kill all the men. Do you think then that it would then warrant forcing men, so that the women don't get raped and all the men don't die anyways, to then fight? And if you do fight, then you have a 50% chance of winning, versus just you will lose if you don't do this.
Absolutely. That's why I'm saying I have
Okay.
concerns about it, but I do think it's sometimes something that's necessary.
Right. So that's the whole idea of, okay, well, there are some circumstances in which, and look, there's been drafts where, like Vietnam War, shouldn't have been in that conflict to begin with. That's a whole nother conversation. Some drafts are not for like the lifeblood protection of the nation. But there are some that are. And so in this instance, it's like, okay, well, you would do that, right? So I don't know, it seems, but why not then compel women?
I think men have a biological advantage, and that's why we do draft men, because they're typically physically stronger. But no, I think that's why. But no, I think in general, I'm not necessarily opposed to draft. I just do have concerns.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think anyone here thinks, oh, it's great, it's fantastic that we're forcing people to fight. No, it's a necessary thing that isn't great.
But what do men get for that sole burden and duty being placed on them?
Well, it's not like women are just sitting back at home, or they
What do you
shouldn't
mean?
be.
What do you mean?
Like they're still doing things to support men. They should be.
Yeah, but from the government down, what is the government compelling by force women to do in wartime? Nothing.
Yeah, and I honestly, I think that it's because men have a physical advantage. But no, I agree. It's different in that way.
Do you think that women that volunteer, I volunteer as tribute, that instead of a man that has a family, a woman that volunteers and is like, well, I have nothing going on for me, so I'll just join the military. Do you think that she could just get an honorable, status or something, once the war's over, once she completes her mission? Would that be something, I guess, applicable for that?
I'm sorry, what?
Oh, pretty much.
It's a total non sequitur, but okay, what's your question?
Oh, well, pretty much, if let's say there's a man with a family and he gets drafted, and this woman's like, hey, this guy's got a whole family going on. I have nothing to do. I'm a single woman. I might as well just go anyways. And I'm an able-bodied woman. If she took his place, would she get an honorable, or could she get an honorable, something?
The Medal of Honor?
I don't know, something. Yeah.
I guess if she...
Would that give an incentive for more women to do it? But then again, why wouldn't the guy?
Women can volunteer for the military.
But
it's just, I don't...
One of the problems with egalitarianism, which is that you end up taking patriarchal systems and then lowering the standards so that women can participate.
Oh,
and that's exactly what happened in the military. It's exactly what happened in the police force. It's exactly what's happened across the board when it comes to any of the protectorate roles in society. Mm-hmm. Guess how many Navy SEALs are women?
I don't know how many.
0.
Oh, well,
Zero.
okay, really?
And it's not because they can't be. In fact, they've been trying to get one to be for years and years and years. And they can't pass the training. They can't do it. They can't pass basic underwater demolition training. They're physically unable to accomplish this. The ones who are, I did some research on the ones who were Green Berets. I didn't think there was any Green Berets. There is actually a few who are, but it turns out those were just political appointments ultimately. And they lowered the standards so that those women could pass as well. In fact, the very first female Green Beret, 2 months after she completed her training, ended up getting arrested and going to jail because she discharged her own firearm negligently in her own house, right?
Oh,
That's how, these are special forces, right? This is the lowering of standards and the deconstruction of patriarchal systems. And the military has to necessarily be a patriarchal system. There's no choice. you rely 100% on men for defense. Here, let me give a counter question. I'll start with a gal in red. She has a lot of political knowledge. I'm not trying to pick on her. She just happens to be able to debate a bit because she has some political knowledge. So what happens? What do you think happens if men stop their role of defending women in the country? What happens? What happens to the country?
It would probably.
You, chair three.
Oh, sorry. Ask your question again. I thought you were asking.
Yeah. What do you think happens to women and children in the nation if men stop defending the country? What happens?
Yeah, I mean, they would be negatively impacted.
Well, they would be destroyed, right?
Yeah.
They would be carried off as war brides.
Yeah,
right?
no, that's why I think it's necessary. Unfortunately, it's just unfortunate.
I agree. It's necessary. So then Brian's question, which has gone unanswered time and time and time again, what the fuck do men get out of that? What are we getting out of this? And that's what Brian wants to know ultimately, right? He's like, what do I get for the fact that right this second, and this is the truth, this is the God's honest truth, right this second, if war breaks out with China tomorrow, we do not have a large enough mass armed forces to deal with it for a prolonged period of time. The government can easily turn to conscription. Not saying they would, but they easily could. Brian, right? If you need men, especially, it doesn't even matter if they have physical ailments, they're going to draft your ass, and that's going to be that. He's eligible for the draft. They don't give a shit about his studio. They don't care about what he's got going on in life. They don't care if he's got millions of dollars in the bank or not. They don't give a shit about any of that. They're going to drag his ass up and hand him a rifle, and off to war he goes. So because that can happen to him, it can't happen to any of you. It cannot happen. What does he get?
Well,
what does he get?
He gets his own personal freedom, for one, and secondly, women are viewed.
He gets his own personal freedom taken.
Erroneous!
No.
Wait, what? What? Go ahead. Wait, explain the personal freedom thing.
No, so by going to war and fighting for yourself, you're fighting for your own personal freedom and the freedom of others, and that's something that we
Yeah, but women would get that too. What does the man get?
Nothing.
Well, what I'm trying to say is women are considered in Christianity to be the crown and stuff. You get a crown, I guess you can say.
I mean, look, you got to make a secular argument on this because there's countries that are secular that draft.
Not for the submitted. Crowns are for the king, not for the submitted.
Yes, that's what
The thing is that, yeah, you get a crown, but unfortunately, heavy is the head that wears the actual crown.
That's what I'm saying.
In this particular case, it's going to be the man who's in charge of the family. It's like, what do the men get socially and societally? For the fact that they have a social obligation to defend all of the women in society. What are they getting for that?
Hopefully they would get a submissive wife.
Well, they don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
They don't even get a country where they can reproduce. They have women who are enfranchised with voting who vote. So, like here, let me give you some more arguments here. Women are the deciding vote on almost all degeneracy in society. Anything that you would consider from a Christian perspective to be a degenerate action, be it LGBTQ, gay marriage, all of this, women are always the deciding vote, which are the positive for those effects every single time.
Yes.
The trans phenomenon right now wouldn't even exist inside the United States absent women enfranchised voting, period. That is actually the case. You can look at a map of political distribution. You can see it for yourself. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
No.
On top of all of that, here's the other major issue that you have. Because this is the case, and men are expected to protect women in the electorate, but women can send them off to war that they themselves don't have to fight via their vote. That's a fundamental unfairness which exists in society. Fundamental unfairness.
That's why I agree with you on the fact that only married households should be able to vote. I'm saying currently it is unfair. Men do not have an advantage. But they do get an advantage if they uphold Christian values. And the country is predominantly Christian.
No,
It's
I would
not.
say the
Oh,
country
it used to be.
is no
It
longer
used to be.
predominantly Christian.
It used to be.
I would say that the majority of people do identify that way, but just self-identification, as we now know, doesn't mean shit.
Yes.
There's lots of people who self-identify as being the opposite sex, for instance, right? That kind of thing. That doesn't mean that they are. And just a simple self-ID of I Christian doesn't have anything to do with your actual status as one.
Yes.
So the question just becomes this. If this fundamental inequality actually does exist, and it does, that women can vote in politicians that then send men off to war against men's will, right? Why is it that men should put up with enfranchisement from women to begin with?
I don't think
Why
they
should they even put up with it?
They shouldn't. They shouldn't.
Yeah, they should not.
They shouldn't.
Yeah, I think women need to seek marriage just as much as men need to seek marriage and stuff. And then if you have a Christian household, the man will fight for the woman, and the woman will nurture the man and provide relief for him.
Wait, so Andrew, is the for the question that you pose, what do men get? Is it the vote? Is that the answer?
They get
That's
nothing.
not the okay.
Men are supposed to get social duties and virtue from the opposite sex. That is
I see. Okay.
And they should get that.
They get an equivalent social duty.
And then
I
they
agree,
don't.
for instance, with Chair 3. There are ontological differences. The state of being between what men and women are itself are different. We're bigger, we're stronger, right? We don't have the same influx of hormones when it comes to rationality, so we tend to make more pragmatic decisions overall. Now, this is not to say women are not logical. They are. Not to say women are not rational. They are. Not to say that women don't have agency. They do. All of those things are correct across the board. But it is still the case. They have influxes of hormones that men don't have to deal with. And one of the biggest stabilizers in a man's brain is testosterone, helps with rational decision making and the skills of rationality itself. Men are uniquely equipped to deal with the political experience, whereas women are not uniquely equipped to deal with it. Does that mean that women are always going to make bad choices politically? No. But the pattern seems to be that they have so far. I'm not even saying you have to disenfranchise women, though I would limit the voting pool significantly for men and women. What I am saying is this specifically. If men have to go sacrifice their lives on behalf of women, and that's the expectation that when the Titanic is going down, the men are the ones who get to stay on the ship and the women and children get the lifeboats, then damn it, they get the big piece of chicken. And what that means is socially, if they get the big piece of chicken, that they get virtuous women. Women are moving towards virtue in society and towards the reproduction of society itself in the great exchange of not hating men, but elevating their status in society as the protectors of all of it. And I think that that's a completely reasonable exchange that from the top down, we could start promoting, and it would make a huge difference in society for both of us.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah. Well said.
Well put. Well put, Andrew. Well put.